Right? Now, a very important element of inquiry-based learning is resource materials. All right? For inquiry-based learning, nonfiction books are really the mainstay. All right, and so this really gives you a chance to integrate as well ELA into what you're doing. Really need to provide students an anchoring experience. See what I did there? A little picture of an anchor. Anybody get that? Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna pretend. You know, it's harder to do jokes over the internet. Right? I'm not famous. Right? But this anchoring experience will assist students to really understand the project. It gives them sort of a basic common knowledge. All right. And then really need to remind students that a critical part of the research process is to look for information, actively look for information that disproves whatever their hypothesis is. All right, and this is important here, and let's be honest, we see this with all our students. We may have done this ourselves. I know I do it in any argument with my own father. All right, quantity does not trump quality. All right, just because you have more resources doesn't mean they're better resources. So one of the things we need to do, particularly in this framework that relies so much on questions and answering questions, make sure folks understand that more resources are not necessarily better resources. All right. Now, kids should also be using the internet and sending email to experts to get their information, and going to local libraries, museums, public agencies such as departments of wildlife, natural resources, human services, safety services. These can all provide a wealth of resource information for students to use, and really students of almost any grade level could do these sorts of things. All right, John Dewey, going back to Dewey again, I can rename this presentation. What did Dewey say way back when, right? Dewey identified that students really want to affirm that the work they're doing is important and that it really matters. And this ties back to that authenticity and that relevance. And using out-of-school expert resources provides students a sense of importance. Being able to go and interview somebody with a title can make such a huge difference for our students. Even just sending them an email asking for information can make this resource so very important for the students and make it feel relevant for them. Okay. Which brings us to classroom climate. All right, it's so very important, and we know you guys probably already do this already, so this really isn't even an issue for you. All right, providing an atmosphere of curiosity, with opportunities for discussion, is such an important element of inquiry-based learning. All right, having students be able to brainstorm and talk to both you and other students about how their projects are progressing provides you with a way to assess student prior knowledge, clear up misconceptions, assess their projects, do that informal assessment. All right, this also is important to emphasize that you should give kids a chance to reflect. All right, is what they have so far in their research relevant to the question that's being asked? Is it relevant to where the direction they're trying to go? All right, and you really want to model effective reflection for students. All right, we need to practice reflection ourselves, of course. All right, if reflection is viewed as a way of thinking rather than a way of doing, it can become a skill transferable to other life skills, such as decision making. And again, going back to Dewey, preparing students to live in an American democracy, right? Reflection allows students to identify other possible solutions or views based on the research question. All right? And it gives kids a chance to evaluate their sources, reconcile conflicting accounts, and create interpretive accounts, and really see, what have other folks found relating to this question so far. All right? So we also have presentation, all right? Now, how are you going to present what you've found so far? All right, what is the model that you're using to present? All right, students have to have an opportunity to take what they've learned, what they've found, present it, and then do something with it. Now, we have a number of examples available for you, all right? And what we'll do is make sure we have a link to this on our wiki. But we have some example presentations available on the Buck Institute for Education website. All right, and you can see a number of examples there relating to a number of different areas and from a number of different grade levels. All right, so I encourage you, definitely want to explore them and use them. All right. Okay. And of course, assessment is important as well. You want a variety of different types of assessments, and you want both teacher assessments, using a rubric, and peer assessments. And peer assessments, might be sort of something you might not think of immediately, but particularly if students are collaborating, you want students the opportunity to evaluate each other. And think about the fact. You lose me? Right. And think about the fact that I just lost my train of thought. Happens all the time. All right. Students think about the fact that they are collaborating with others, and they're also responsible for others, getting back to that democratic citizenship. So we have some examples of self and peer assessments there out of the West Virginia Department of Education. All right. Just some good examples there you have a chance to explore, and again, that link is in the PowerPoint. And we also have, of course, teacher assessments. All right. From the Buck Institute, and they have you see a number of resources here, planning forms, handouts, rubrics, right? Give you a chance, you can explore those at your leisure. So we provided some links for those. And of course, we have a couple of assessments also available on our own wiki. All right? Okay. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? I'll just check for questions here. Online silence is affirmation. So I tell my wife when I'm playing my computer games. Anybody? No? Okay. All right, no questions. So let's move on and talk about inquiry in action. All right. We discussed the features of inquiry-based learning, and so let's consider again our inquiry arc from the C3 framework and really put it all together. All right? And ultimately, remember that our standards really do lend themselves well to inquiry. And so as we develop our units, one of our tasks should be to consider ways we can integrate elements in the inquiry model into the process and the final unit. So we're going to use a 7th grade standard and generalization as our example. All right? And so you see here, 7G.1.3, explain how natural disasters, preservation efforts, and human modification of the environment affect modern societies and regions. And our generalization, preservation efforts, and human modifications to the environment may result in consequences that transform conditions for human life. All right, so going back to our inquiry arc, all right, we see right here, all right, we have our 4 features: developing questions and planning inquiries, applying disciplinary tools and concepts, and evaluating sources and using evidence and communicating conclusions, taking informed actions. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through each one using this standard and generalization. All right? Okay. So, developing questions. All right? Questioning, which is really going to be, remember, we're going to be the focus of one of our next webinars, is really so very important in the inquiry arc. So as you consider your clarifying objective in the generalization you're teaching towards, what kind of question could serve as a focal point within an inquiry model? And so we have 2 sample questions that might be created right here. How can we modify physical and geographic conditions to protect against natural disasters? And what should the role of government be in environmental safety and protection? Now remember, one of the most important things when thinking about questions is this should not be a question that can just be answered by going to one place and one book. You want your question to be big enough, as we see here, to connect back to your generalization, your standard, and really have a variety of possible answers, right, and solutions. Now, while you can certainly create the question that will be explored, as we saw in the Buck video, for example, the inquiry arc really does encourage students to take ownership of their learning by developing their own questions. Now, this is where modeling and practice are key. So you want to really explore, for example, the students, the strength and weakness of maybe your own question. Now, this would illustrate for them how it connects to what is drawn from the clarifying objective and even your generalization, because you really want to give them a model to create their own questions. And remember, finally, that whatever questions are used or created, they should be relevant and engaging for the student. They have to be able to see the why of the question. Why does the question matter? It really needs to be for more than just, oh, it's an important social studies question. Oh, big deal, who cares? I'm going to forget it on Saturday, right? If they're answering the question in order to take action, communicate, or accomplish a goal personally engaging to them, there really be an authentic and meaningful purpose there. All right, and if you look in the notes in this PowerPoint, once we post it for you, we have a link to a resource by a gentleman named Perkins, who really has a very good little article on questions and the importance of questions in the PBL approach. All right. Now, taking what we have and really thinking about disciplinary tools and concepts here, in our work across the state, we've really stressed the importance of disciplinary literacy in the social studies and integrating it into our conceptual unit development. So this really aligns us well with this piece of the Inquiry Act and the use of an inquiry model. So consider how each of the different ways that social scientists might consider inquiry questions and connect to our generalization. For example, all right, a historian might examine past modifications. All right, the geographer might map out changes in the environment. The economist would consider the financial impact of government efforts. The political scientist might consider the legislation and public policy implications. And the cultural researcher might consider social changes resulting from modifications. All right, disciplinary literacy and thinking through these lenses, which we've emphasized again and again in our work, and you are doing in your own work already, connects so very easily and greatly to the Inquiry Act and the C3 framework. Now, we have a resource that we really definitely want to make sure you find here. A couple of years ago, we created some sort of little handouts we have, which give you the lenses here of the historian and so on. Now we have K5 right here. This is under the elementary resources, by the way, so I just open this up and share this with you, because this could be a handout that you could use with your students as you do this model. All right, and you see historians, economists, political scientists, geographers, all right, culture anthropologists. And you can use this for elementary, you can use middle, you can use this for high school even, all right, because they're all effective at all levels. But it's a little resource that really ties directly into that inquiry model and really shows that we have been in this state already working with the inquiry model in some form or other. All right, and so you are then working with this model in some form or other. All right, and you really should feel proud of, I think, where we are. All right. So let's talk now about sources and evidence. All right. Again, this connects easily to what we're already doing in our standards. All right, the research piece here is vital. We already emphasize in our standards disciplinary skills and literacy. For example, look, we're talking about 7th grade here. We have a 7th grade generalization, 7th grade standard, and my computer wants to restart, and that's not going to happen. All right, excuse me, I apologize. All right. We already have this importance of sources and evidence in our standards. For example, 7.H.1.2 has students summarize the literal meaning of historical documents to establish context. 7.H.1.3, using primary and secondary sources to interpret various historical perspectives. 7G.G.2.2, using maps, charts, graphs, geographic data to interpret and draw conclusions about socioeconomic and environmental issues, which definitely ties into this one, right? But we're already doing a lot of this in our own standards already, which means we're already doing it in our own units. All right, we're working with that inquiry model in some form. All right. Of course, you're going to build for opportunities for practice in your unit. Learning experiences that you do in the unit will help students answer the question and complete whatever you have designed as that final performance task. Now, just remember that you really want to encourage students to use a variety of outside resources for this and to consider the resources very carefully. We talked about the fact that quantity does not best quality, and that's key. Questions to think about too. How much guidance do you want to give them on resources? Do you want to provide the work to analyze the appropriateness of sources? May be appropriate for some students and not others. How much freedom should they be allowed in selecting sources? You're going to give them very specific sources that they can look at. You can give them wide leeway. It all depends on the type of inquiry model that you're using, all right, and what you're comfortable with and what they're comfortable with. All right? And then we have communication and action. All right? This is the final phase of that inquiry arc. And what this looks like might differ based on the inquiry model that you're using. Right? But it has students finding a way to communicate their findings and taking action based on the conclusions that they've drawn. Now, this could differ depending on the inquiry model that you're using, but the work that we're doing in North Carolina with our conceptual standards, generalizations, and conceptual unit development really ties very nicely into this phase of the inquiry arc. Have you already created a performance task for your unit? Well, this can be built into that performance task, right? And again, just think about how much guidance you're going to give and expectations you'll have for your students in this phase, depending on what the inquiry model you're using dictates. Whatever you model use, however, students will demonstrate understanding of, for example, the consequences of preservation efforts and modifications to the environment and how it connects back to our initial question. All right, whatever they're going to be doing, all right, it's going to demonstrate that understanding of that generalization you see on your screen, and that's standard. Right? And they're going to do something with it, an action. Right? The inquiry arc encourages action. Right? Some sort of a letter to a governor or some sort of service project, for example. Inquiry and service learning can go very closely together. And that's, again, another area that we're really working hard at. Right? And of course, our student leadership institute in the CERT, we definitely encourage you to consider.